Linda had always been the girl no one looked at twice. In the village, her name was whispered with jokes. Fat Linda, they called her, as if her body was a curse she'd chosen. Every time she walked past the market, giggles followed her like a shadow. The girls in school never let her borrow their dresses, and the boys never saved her a seat on the bus. She carried their shame on her shoulders, even though she had done nothing wrong except exist in a body that didn't fit their idea of beautiful. She remembered the time she gathered courage to wear lipstick to school. It was a soft red her late mother used to wear, the only thing she had left of her. But the moment she entered the classroom, laughter erupted. "Who's she trying to impress?" one boy shouted. She wiped it off before the bell rang. That day, she swore never to wear anything again that made her feel confident, because confidence only made her a target. At home, things weren't better. Her father had once said, "You'll never find a husband if you don't shrink that belly." Even at 16, she cooked for her siblings while listening to her aunts argue about how she should be sent to the city to work and lose weight. Her mirror became her enemy. Every reflection whispered, "Higher." But inside her, there was a fire, a secret hunger, not for food, but for freedom. She dreamed of walking into a room and owning it. She fantasized about tying her hair up, putting on a beautiful dress, and making heads turn not in mockery, but in awe. She wanted to feel seen, not for what she lacked, but for who she was. That desire grew louder each time she cried herself to sleep, hugging her pillow tighter than any human had ever hugged her. One afternoon, while passing the town square, she saw a colorful banner. "Get the body of your dreams. Transform in 30 days. No experience needed." It fluttered above a dusty iron gate that led to a worn-down building. "Elite Muscle Gym," it read. Below, a smiling man flexed his abs. Linda stood there, staring. Her fingers trembled. Something pulled her forward. For the first time, possibility entered her bloodstream. That night, she couldn't sleep. She looked at her stretched-out school blouse, her thighs that rubbed when she walked, and whispered to herself, "You can change this." She didn't know how, but she knew she had to try. Not for the boys. Not for her father. For her. For the girl inside who had never felt the thrill of wearing her favorite dress in public. The girl who wanted to run without being laughed at. Linda began saving. Every mango she sold, every errand she ran for the neighbors' kids, she tucked coins under her mattress. Days turned into weeks. Her hands blistered from hard work, but her dream stayed bright. And finally, one morning, she had enough to buy a gym pass. She clutched the bills to her chest and whispered, "Now they'll see me." She didn't know that the gate she was about to walk through wasn't a doorway to confidence, but a trap in disguise. A place that promised beauty but devoured innocence. She was chasing light, but darkness was waiting just on the other side of the gym door. When Linda arrived at the gym, it wasn't what she imagined. Not even close. There were no clean lockers, no bright lights, no friendly instructors. The walls were covered in peeling paint, the floors creaked under her weight, and the entire place smelled like old sweat and something metallic. There were no women inside, just a few shirtless men lifting rusty weights, grunting loudly as they eyed her like she didn't belong. The mirrors were cracked, the fans didn't work, and the music blared loud enough to shake the windows. But Linda kept walking. Her heart thudded in her chest, louder than the music. She told herself, "This is temporary. The ugliness will pass. I will change here. I will become someone." She tightened her grip on her little nylon bag, filled with nothing more than a towel and hope. From behind the weight benches, a man appeared. Tall, with arms like tree trunks and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He called himself Drex. His voice was smooth, too smooth, like syrup poured over a trap. "You came to change your life, right?" he asked, looking her up and down without shame. Linda nodded. He smirked and said, "I can make that happen. But transformation requires obedience." Those words should have warned her, but she was too eager to notice. Drex didn't ask about her goals. He didn't show her a plan. He just said, a first rule, no questions. Second, no excuses. Third, sign this. He handed her a folded paper with bold red text, wavering consent. She didn't read it. She couldn't. The letters blurred. She just saw the bottom line that said a sign to begin your transformation journey. Her hand trembled, but she signed. And with that stroke of ink, she unknowingly handed over more than just her time. She was shown a small locker, dented, dirty, with the number 7 scratched onto it. "Your locker," Drex said. "Your second home. She smiled nervously and placed her towel inside. She didn't know that 7 girls before her had used that same locker. None had returned to the gym again. Her first session didn't involve a treadmill or weights. Instead, Drex closed the blinds, dimmed the lights, and told her to stretch in silence. "I need to see how your body moves," he said. His voice was too close, his eyes too sharp. Linda was uncomfortable, but she told herself, "It's normal. He's the expert. I need this." She pushed down the fear and followed every instruction. As she finished, he handed her a bottle of protein shake. "Drink it all. We don't waste strength here." She drank. It tasted strange bitter like old medicine. She wanted to ask what was in it, but his eyes told her not to. Drex smiled again and said, "Good. You're mine now." Linda walked home that night feeling sore, and not just in her muscles. Something inside her felt off, but she convinced herself this was part of change. Pain before beauty. That's what they always said. What she didn't know was that this pain had nothing to do with beauty and everything to do with control. Linda thought it was just routine. Every gym had paperwork, or so she believed. The moment Drex handed her the thin, crumpled sheet, his eyes locked onto hers with a stare that warned her not to question. "Just sign here," he said calmly, tapping the bottom line. "Don't worry, it's just for insurance. You're safe here." But those words, "You're safe here," were a lie dressed in politeness. The form wasn't even typed properly. Some parts were photocopied and others handwritten, red ink bleeding into the margins. Strange phrases caught her eye. A consent to internal observation if video surveillance permitted. A trainer has full discretion over exercise method. She didn't understand, but she was too afraid to ask. She felt the other gym guys watching her from across the room. She felt her weight, her sweat, her insecurity pressing down on her like a stone. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the pen. Drex leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Oh, look at you. You don't want to go back out there the same, do you? You want people to see you differently. You want them to respect you, maybe even want you. Sign this, and I'll make sure of it." His breath smelled like burnt protein and lies. Linda froze, and then she signed. The moment her name hit the page, Drex's smile changed. It wasn't charming anymore, it was satisfied. Like a spider finally feeling the last thread close around its prey, he folded the paper and tucked it inside a locked drawer, which she never saw again. From that point forward, everything changed. The tone of his voice, the intensity of her sessions, even the looks from the other gym members. The waiver was never mentioned again, but it hung over her like a silent chain. Whenever she flinched during a workout, he would grin and say, "You signed for this." If she was late or asked too many questions, he would whisper, "Be careful, Linda. You're under agreement." She didn't even know what she had agreed to. And every time she tried to remember, she only saw her own name at the bottom of that cursed form. The gym became a world of obedience. She had no rights there, only rules. Drex would say, "I'll push harder, bend lower. Don't talk unless I tell you." At first, she thought it was just tough coaching, but slowly it started to feel like ownership. She wasn't being trained, she was being conditioned. One day, she tried to leave early. She had cramps, her body was aching. She picked up her bag, only for Drex to block the door. "No early exits, not unless you want me to call in your contract." Linda stared at him, shocked. "You'd be surprised what's written in fine print," he muttered. That was when she realized. She had handed her power to someone who would never give it back. And yet, she kept coming. Because something inside her whispered that maybe pain was part of transformation. Maybe Drex knew what he was doing. Maybe, just maybe, this was the price of finally being beautiful. But deep inside her, another voice was screaming, "This is not what you signed up for." She just didn't know how loud that scream would become. On her third visit to the gym, Drex told Linda that she was a special. He said most girls didn't last beyond a week, but she had a discipline in her eyes. Linda didn't know whether it was a compliment or a threat, but her heart fluttered with pride. She thought maybe she was finally being seen, not as the fat girl, not as the joke, but as someone worthy of attention. But she didn't know yet that attention can be the most dangerous kind of hunger. Drex said she'd start a personal training, one-on-one sessions with him behind closed doors. "It's how we accelerate your results," he explained. "You want results, don't you?" Linda nodded. She wanted them more than anything. She didn't realize that these sessions would isolate her, strip her confidence, and train her in ways that had nothing to do with fitness. Inside the private room, there were no other trainers, no female staff. The mirrors on the walls were too clean, almost unnaturally spotless. There were no gym mats, just one camera in the corner, disguised as a smoke detector. Drex made her perform stretches that felt inappropriate, but when she hesitated, he'd snap, "Your body has limits because your mind does. Break the shame or stay ugly." The words hurt, but she obeyed. He started adjusting her positions with his hands, touching her waist, her thighs, her back longer than necessary. "Oh, don't flinch," he'd say. "Oh, that's weakness leaving the body." Linda hated it, but confusion drowned her instincts. Was this how transformation worked? Was it meant to be uncomfortable? She didn't want to quit. Not now. Not when she was already seeing slight changes in the mirror. What made it worse was that he never raised his voice. He used soft authority, the kind that makes you question your own discomfort. He never said anything outright filthy. He made everything sound like professional coaching. But the way he watched her breathe, the way his eyes didn't move when she bent over, it wasn't training. It was something darker. One day, she caught him adjusting something on the ceiling, a small black dot with a red blink. When she asked, he laughed. "Oh, don't worry, it's just for posture review. You'll thank me later." She nodded, even though her stomach twisted. There were no review sessions, no feedback. Just endless repetitions of tasks that made her feel more exposed than empowered. She stopped looking at the clock during training. It was like time didn't exist inside that room. And when it ended, she left drenched in sweat, shame, and silence. She didn't tell anyone. Who would believe her? People already laughed at her for being overweight. If she spoke now, they'd say she was just being sensitive, or worse, jealous of the trainer's attention, so she kept quiet. She told herself, this is what change feels like. But deep inside, she was already changing in ways she couldn't recognize. Her body might have been slimming, but her soul was growing heavy, and the girl who once dreamed of being seen was now trapped in the darkest gaze of all. It started with a small suggestion. Stop eating rice. Linda nodded. That was easy enough. Then came no fruits after 4 p.m. strange, but manageable. Within a week, Drex had taken over her entire meal plan. She wasn't allowed to eat without sending a photo of her food. If she failed to report, she would be punished with double workouts. It wasn't training anymore. It was a system of control. At first, she thought it was part of being elite. Oh, celebrities do this, she told herself. This is the price of results. But soon it got worse. Drex started choosing what she wore. No loose clothes, he said. I want to see the change. Well, I want to see the change. Then he took her phone during workouts, claiming she needed to stay focused. Eventually, she wasn't allowed to bring her phone at all. She had no contact with the outside world during those hours. He texted her in the middle of the night saying things like, don't snack. I know your cravings, and your body is mine until it becomes perfect. At first, she thought it was accountability, but there was something wrong with the way his words lingered in her head. His voice followed her into her dreams. She couldn't sleep peacefully anymore. Her mind echoed with his phrases, "We're nothing without this, Jim. You owe me your transformation." Drex started invading her personal space outside the gym, too. He'd show up unannounced near her home. Just checking if you're keeping the form, he'd say. Once, he sent her a video of herself working out. She didn't know how he got the footage. She never gave him permission. That's when she realized he was watching her more than she ever agreed to. Linda began losing weight rapidly, but she also lost her voice. Her friends noticed, look amazing, but where's your smile? She smiled, but it was hollow. Even her aunt grew suspicious. Hey, a trainer of yours, you sure he's not doing too much? But Linda defended him. He's intense, yes, but that's what change takes. Deep down, she didn't believe her own words. Her body was shrinking, but her fear was growing. She no longer looked like the girl who had joined the gym weeks ago. And not just physically, her eyes had changed. Her spine curved slightly forward, as if always expecting impact. She walked like someone who was being watched, even when she was alone. Every time she tried to resist Drex's instructions, he reminded her of the paper she signed. You agreed to my system, he would say. You want to go back to being invisible? The emotional manipulation worked. She stayed quiet. She followed. She obeyed. Not because she wanted to, but because she feared what would happen if she didn't. And perhaps the most terrifying thing was, part of her still wanted his approval. That's what broke her the most. She didn't just fear him, she needed him. At least that's what he made her believe. And once a trainer owns your thoughts, there's no treadmill in the world that can help you escape. One evening, while wiping sweat from her brow after another brutal session, Linda overheard something strange. Two men in the corner whispered, "Remember that girl from 2 months ago?" She stopped coming. No one's seen her. Linda paused. She hadn't seen a single other girl training in the gym since she joined. Not one. She suddenly realized she had no female before and after stories to compare with. No success photos. Just Drex's word. The next day, curiosity overtook fear. Linda asked Drex casually, "Where are the other girls you trained? You said you had lots of clients like me." His expression turned cold for a moment before he forced a smile. They moved on. Big transformations. They don't need me anymore. But the way he said it didn't feel right. It was too final, too practiced. Like a lie he had told before. A few days later, Linda arrived early. The front door was unlocked. No one was around. The lights were dim. The music hadn't started yet. She wandered toward the back hallway where Drex kept the old lockers. One was half open. Number 3. Inside, she found a bag, torn, faded, and a photograph. A young girl, slim but sad-eyed, stood beside the Elite Muscle banner. On the back was scribbled, "Don't let him break you." That was the first crack in the mirror for Linda. She began digging deeper. She asked the nearby tea stall vendor if he had seen other girls come and go. The man lowered his eyes and said, "They used to, but not anymore. One cried outside this gym a year ago, said she was being followed. We never saw her again." His voice was trembling. Linda's blood ran cold. She began noticing the subtle warnings. There were scratched words under the locker room bench. "He lies." On the broken fan above the treadmill, someone had etched a camera here. Even in the women's toilet stall, a crude message was written in pen. "If you're reading this, run." Linda started seeing shadows where there were none. She felt like someone was always behind her, even when she was alone. Her transformation wasn't just physical. She was unraveling. She knew now she wasn't Drex's first project. She was just the next in line. A new toy for his obsession with power and control. But something inside her changed. Fear turned to fury. She had once come to this gym desperate to change her body. Now she wanted to change her fate. She started memorizing his routines, watching where he stored his papers, how he moved when distracted. She didn't know what she'd do with the knowledge, but she was preparing. She wouldn't disappear like the others. Still, every day she returned, because if she didn't, she feared he would come find her. And by then, she had learned one terrifying truth. People like Drex don't just let go. They erased. Linda had lost over 10 kilograms. Her arms were leaner, her stomach flatter, her jawline visible. The mirror finally reflected the girl she always dreamed of being, or so it seemed. But every time she stared at her reflection, something felt missing. There was no joy, no pride, only silence. And in her eyes, a kind of hollowness that hadn't been there before. As her waistline shrunk, her soul seemed to disappear with it. People in the village started noticing her. Men who had once ignored her now stopped her in the streets. Women whispered and stared. "Look at Linda, so beautiful now." But the compliments landed on her ears like cold rain. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt numb. Her body belonged to their gaze now, not to her. She was no longer invisible, but she wasn't free either. Her aunt, the only person who had ever protected her, stared long and hard one evening. "You've changed, child," she said gently. But not just outside. Your voice is different. You don't smile anymore." Linda tried to force one, but tears pooled in her eyes. She rushed to the bathroom and locked the door. That night she sat in the bathtub, hugging herself, whispering, "I'm okay. I'm better now. This is what I wanted, isn't it?" But the truth was she hadn't lost fat. She had lost herself. Drex, on the other hand, grew more possessive. "We're perfect now," he'd say. Don't talk to anyone else. Don't mess this up." He began choosing her clothes again. Made her wear tighter outfits during workouts. "We have to maintain the results," he'd whisper, touching her waist a little too long. He said he was proud of her, but pride had never felt so suffocating. Her mind began to break into two. One side of her screamed for escape. The other stayed quiet, terrified. At night, she would wake up sweating, hearing his voice even in her dreams. "Without me, you're nothing." She stopped trusting even herself. She didn't know if what she was feeling was paranoia or prophecy. She tried to reconnect with her old friends, Wayans, but when she texted them, they either ignored her or replied coldly. "Now that you're hot, you remember us?" one said. Another wrote, "Be careful. I've heard stories about that gym." Linda wanted to confess everything, but fear choked her. If she spoke, she wasn't sure she'd survive what would follow, and so she stood in the middle of a cruel reality, beautiful on the outside, broken within. Her transformation was now a prison, a carefully designed performance. Every calorie counted, every movement monitored. She had become what society wanted, and in the process, she had lost the one thing that had once kept her alive, hope. It was a Wednesday. Rain slapped the tin roof of the gym as thunder growled in the distance. Most clients had left early. Not that there were many. Drex told Linda to lock up and mop the floor while he ran an errand. She was alone for the first time in weeks. The gym was quieter than usual. The mirrors no longer reflected sweat and power. They reflected her fear. And behind that fear, curiosity was bubbling. As she mopped around the old lockers, her foot hit something loose, a tile that shifted slightly under pressure. She bent down, her heart thudding. The tile popped open just enough for her to see a gap underneath. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free. Beneath was a rusted key tied to a red ribbon. A strange symbol was burned into the tag. 3. She looked around, certain she was being watched. But the gym was empty. She crept to the far corner, a part of the building Drex always kept locked. Behind an old weight rack, a faded brown door stood, barely noticeable. Her hand shook as she inserted the key. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. A gust of cold, stale air rushed out, and with it, the smell of secrets. Inside was darkness. She flicked her phone's flashlight on. What she saw made her knees buckle. Racks of clothes, women's clothes, stained, torn, forgotten. Dozens of used protein bottles, identical to the ones she'd been drinking. Walls lined with photographs. Smiling girls at first. Then photos of the same girl's eyes blank, shoulders slumped. Shoulders slumped. She recognized the face from the old locker photo, and others she'd never seen, but now could never forget. At the back of the room there was a small table with several memory cards stacked in piles, each labeled with dates, training dates. Her name was on the most recent pile. A client #7 transformation, day 48. Her breath caught. Her body froze. There was even a list, names crossed out in red. Only hers was still open. She was the last. Linda grabbed a card and shoved it into her pocket. As she turned to leave, she knocked over a box. A single file spilled out, full of printed screenshots. Some were from camera footage of girls in compromising positions during a training. Some were stills from shower areas, changing rooms. She felt sick, violated, furious. A sudden bang startled her. The front door slammed shut. Someone was back. Linda stuffed everything she could into her gym bag and closed the hidden room, replacing the tile carefully. She ran to the bathroom, splashed her face, and tried to act normal. Drex walked in moments later, rain dripping from his coat, eyes scanning the room like a predator sensing a shift. "Everything all right?" he asked casually. Linda smiled, nodded. But inside, a storm had already begun to rage. Not outside, but inside her soul. She now held something powerful, the truth, and she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. Linda didn't sleep that night. She sat under a flickering bulb in her aunt's kitchen, watching the rain trail down the windows, the memory card clutched tightly in her hand. For weeks, she had been a prisoner in her own skin, worshiping a body built on fear, sculpted by shame. But now she held proof. Proof not only of what was done to her, but what had been done to others like her. She uploaded the footage anonymously, sent copies to every number she could find. Local authorities, news blogs, women's shelters. She didn't wait for a thank you. She didn't wait for revenge. She simply walked away from the gym, from the fake validation, from the voice that had told her she was nothing without pain. Weeks passed. Drex was arrested, his gym sealed. But more importantly, women started coming forward, not just the ones from that gym, but girls everywhere who had been silenced in the name of transformation. They called Linda brave. They called her strong. But she didn't want applause. All she wanted was to look in the mirror and see herself. Not a project, not a product. Just a person. Scarred, yes, but still standing. And that, my friends, is the real transformation.